when we first landed in Samoa, it was probably 4:30, 5 o'clock a.m. in the morning, and I always remember my dad telling me that it's super hot over there, and like I figured it was hot because it's an island, coming from the islands, because that's where my dad was originally from. So I knew it was going to be hot, but what made it even more hot was the humidity there. And so I remember getting off the plane and just feeling this wall of heat, and that was my first experience in Samoa. I was like, I don't know if I can do this all day, preaching the gospel in this extremity of heat. I didn't think I could do it, especially in a suit. But when we got to the mission home with the president and the assistants of the president, they actually took our suits away. So and locked them up in a closet for those 2 years. So after that, but I still remember that heat shock was the first thing my impression in Samoa. The thing about Samoa is that the people are so welcoming. They are always happy all the time. I mean, they have a different character about them. They're always more than willing to invite others into their home. They have that sense of attitude where what's mine is yours, and that's a thing that I didn't notice very often. Like I knew coming from, because my dad is Samoan, just growing up, I kind of gained a basic knowledge of the culture that they're willing to do anything for you, and family's family. But seeing how random people I'd never met in my life give up almost everything they had for us missionaries, because every house that you go to in Samoa, they're going to feed you no matter what time of day it is. They're always going to bring you food, and just knowing that they might not have dinner, lunch, or breakfast for that time, they're more than willing to give it up to you. So just the sacrifice that the Samoan people have over there is just unexplainable. So my dad is originally from Samoa, and he moved to the state. He grew up there till he's about 16, and then moved to the States. And so I'm actually half, because my mom is of the Caucasian descent. So getting to know the culture is, from my dad's point of view, was an amazing experience for me on my mission. Because there was things that he told me before my mission that I didn't quite understand. Like the culture, the respectful terms that they would use over there. I didn't really understand those until I actually went over there and saw those happen for myself. So yeah, he was born and raised there, and then I still have a family over there right now, which was crazy, because I was taught, or in my patriarchal blessing says, that I was going to be doing family history work on my mission. So when I realized that I was going to Samoa, I kind of figured, yep, I better get started on that. So I think there's about a couple 100,000, the population in Samoa entirely, and I know that it's a pretty high percentage of the population is LDS. I would say it's close to about 40-50%. So which I didn't know about until I got there, and it's crazy to see that all the different chapels over there, whether it's LDS or of a different faith, they're all built. They're beautiful buildings, because the people of Samoa are religious people, and they, I didn't really meet anybody who didn't believe in a God out there. So they're always religious. The thing about the LDS temples that sticks out, or the LDS chapels over there, is that they're blue and white, which I wasn't accustomed to coming from Utah. And the thing about the chapels is that there's not one every couple miles. They're kind of scattered throughout the islands over there. Excuse me. And they're beautiful buildings. They stand out, and it's like, how can you not know that church is true when you see just the work and the design and the perfection of the chapels over there. And they do have one LDS temple out there. It's in the middle of the capital in Apia. So, and it's kind of a cool background, because there's around the temple, there's a school called Pesenga, and Pesenga is pretty much the LDS church school there. And so that's where most of the kids that are of the LDS faith will go to that school, where they can learn. And I know in that school they teach you to speak in English, and which I thought was astounding, that they make you speak English that way because, you know, English is one of the primary languages on this planet, and that, you know, to gain that knowledge, you'll be able to use it, you know, in different places throughout your life. And I remember my dad, because my dad went to Paisanga when he grew up, and I remember sometimes they would punish him for not speaking English, and I always thought that was funny. And he, you know, lets me know now that he's so grateful that they did make him speak English, because it's gotten him where he is today. So, I mean, just the temple over there is amazing. It's by far my favorite temple. It's almost as you have that tropical setting and then just a temple. It's almost like you're in paradise, and it truly is. The heat, the noise, the ocean, all that sound goes away when you're kind of on the temple grounds, and it's kind of crazy to see that and feel that when you're on the temple grounds in Samoa. There's a village in Samoa called Sauniatu, and Sauniatu is by far one of the most prettiest places in Samoa, and they have this, they call faleo'os, these buildings, or these little hut fixtures, all over Samoa, and they have this big one, and it's called the David O. McKay Fale, because David O. McKay went there, and he gave a blessing to the people of Samoa, and especially the area of Sauniatu, in which there would be, you know, vegetation, and that it would be beautified there. And it's kind of crazy to know that, you know, an apostle or prophet of the Lord, you know, went to this tiny place in this tiny island to announce that blessing. And I always knew about Sauniatu because that's where my dad was born, and he always told me, you know, if you ever get a chance, try to go visit Sauniatu when you're out there. And thank goodness for one of the areas I was in was close to Sauniatu, and we were able to go there on a P day, and we were able to, you know, the view there is amazing. I mean, everything is so green. There's waterfalls everywhere. There's just mountain ranges over there that are just astounding, that you can't see anywhere else except in Sauniatu. And you can almost feel the presence of, you know, the Spirit constantly with you in that area, just because a prophet of the Lord was in that area as well. And with the population, and going back to attendance in sacrament meetings and church meetings as well, I would say that most of the time the congregation is pretty full for the different wards. There's a lot of wards over there. I know there was 3 stakes in Upolu, which is the main island in Western Samoa, and I think they've gotten it up a couple more since I left. So the church is continuing to grow out there. One of my favorite things is that I miss here, or miss back there coming here, is that the hymns that they sing in sacrament meeting, they almost scream to the top of their lungs, and I miss that so much, because here in Utah, not a lot of people are singing the hymns to what they should be, and it's almost like a whisper here compared to what they're singing out there in Samoa. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure the primary kids in Samoa could out-sing a congregation here. It's just insane, and the spirit you feel when they're singing the hymns is just overwhelming. The Samoa Apia Mission, there's only one, and it covers all the islands, and there's 3 main islands. There's Upolu and Sava'i, which cover Western Samoa, and then there's Tutuila, which is American Samoa. And American Samoa is a U.S. territory, so over there they use U.S. currency and drive on the right side of the road instead of the left, and it's almost like a Hawaii sort of feeling in American Samoa. And I had the opportunity to serve on all 3 islands. And Upolu is pretty developed. A lot of people over there, it's pretty developed over there, have homes and electricity. And then there's American Samoa, where usually everything is pretty updated as well. But my favorite island to serve on was Sava'i, and that was the back side of Western Samoa. And I actually got to serve in the back side in a town, or in a village called Neafu. And in Neafu, it's on the very back side of that back island in Sava'i. And it's crazy to see how much of a third world that country was, going there. I remember when I first got transferred out there, people, I didn't see any houses. There was no houses out there. It was mostly just shacks that they had built with sheet metal across the top for roofs, and then just wood that they would use from trees out there. And, it would get super dark, but it would also be really lit up at night because of all the stars and the moon out there. And it was crazy to see how these people could survive without the things that we have here, technology, electricity, and things like that. And serving in Neafu gave me a greater appreciation for what I have here in the States now. You take for granted so many things that you have here when you go to a third world country like that. I remember having to do my own laundry in a bucket using a scrub brush, and my knuckles were pretty sore from scrubbing my white shirts. And you take for granted that, and transportation, walking or biking in that humidity can get rough at times, and you take for granted air conditioning and things like that. In Western Samoa, in Sava'i and Upolu, there a lot of people, the work that they do is just on their plantations. They're constantly working on their plantations, pretty much from sun up to sundown. And there's not a lot of, there is job opportunities out there, definitely in the city area in Upolu, where the temple's located. There's a bunch of job opportunities, different buildings, fast food restaurant places that people go to work at. And then there's also, you have your policemen, and I guess they have some sort of fire department out there, but it's not as developed as it is here. But there is policemen out there, but most of the people just work on their plantations that they have. And it's crazy to see that, because some of their plantations aren't even close to where they live. They're miles and miles away. And for transportation, a lot of people have bikes, or they'll walk. There are buses throughout the islands that'll take you from one part to another part of the island. So there's different buses that you might have to use and travel to get from one island to another part of the island as well. And the buses are huge. They're not like your typical bus here. It's almost like they cut off the front of a diesel truck and then just built around it, which it's kind of crazy to see that they do that, and all of them look the same. And people in Samoa are always so generous and willing to give of themselves. A lot of people have just small trucks, and you'll always see like maybe 10 to 15 people in the back of a truck, and one is always constantly hopping out to the destination that they have if someone's going in town. Because I know from the back part, when I served in Sava'i, the back part of the island all the way to town, to where like the wharf and market was, it was about a good hour and a half drive. And it's a bumpy road. The roads aren't well paved like they are here in the States, and so it's a long drive going bump to bump, and especially if there's that many people. But they're always willing to help one another out, whether you're of the LDS faith or different faith, different village, different beliefs. It's crazy to see the amount of respect that the people of Samoa have for each other. And it's a little different throughout the islands as well. There's a lot of buses, and a lot of people own cars in Upolu, where the temple is and the city is, or the capital of Samoa, in Apia. And then Sava'i, there's just a couple buses that'll take you around the island, and not a lot of people have cars over there. So it's mostly manual transportation, like walking, or if you have a bike, or things like that. And I was lucky enough to experience the transportation and the lack of development in all three islands. And I started off in Upolu for about, I think it was about 5 months, and then I spent the majority of my mission back in Sava'i, which was about 10 months. came back to Upolu for a couple months, and then finished my mission in American Samoa. And in American Samoa, everything's pretty developed. Usually, at least some member of the family has a car over there. The houses are pretty similar to what they are here. A well-constructed family room, bedrooms, a bathroom. So they're pretty constructed over here, unlike the other two islands. They mostly use just sheet metal and then just a couple posts. And on those back islands, you can always see into the houses. There's no windows. It's almost just like a sort of like a tree house sort of thing, where you can see who's inside. And it's crazy to see that, and you'll see everybody have their personal belongings, TVs or radios that they might have. And that's what I love about Samoa, is the respect that people have there, because the crime rate is so low out there. I mean, the police officers, if someone's speeding, to pull you down or pull you over, they'll just wave your hand down. They don't have their own police cars. Some do. But policemen will just be standing on the side and they'll wave you down. And the people there will definitely pull over for the police officer because of the amount of respect. And I think respect is one of the main features in the culture of Samoa. And, you know, in American Samoa, it's a little different. They still use the culture terms and things like that Upolu and Sava'i use, but it's more Americanized over there, in which, you know, a lot of people speak English over there. I mostly spoke English when I was in American Samoa, and, you know, the schools over there are definitely English. They play American sports, basketball, football, whereas in Western Samoa they play rugby and a thing called netball that's sort of like basketball but a little different than that. So they're definitely the same culture-wise, but there's different aspects to the different islands, which was pretty unique and awesome to see that. When I first got there, because it's a jungle, you know, when I first got there, I was like, okay, there's probably going to be a ton of wildlife, you know, monkeys or tigers or some sort of just, you know, animals that are going to be in that jungle. But, you know, come to find out, there was nothing like that out there, which I was grateful for. I remember, you know, some instances there was, they have these centipedes called aqualoas, and they're super fast, and if they bite you, it really hurts, and you'll swell up. Some people can even die from these bites. And, you know, I remember one night we were sleeping in just this little, you know, shack out there in the back island in Sava'i, and I remember, you know, feeling something on my neck in the middle of the night, and I didn't think anything of it. And, you know, it started, like, you know, grabbing itself, attaching itself to my neck with all its legs. And I remember whispering to my companion, you know, I was like, Soa, which means companion. I was like, get up. And I was waiting for him to get up, and I finally see him get up, and he has his flashlight on. He's like, is everything okay? I was like, is there something on my neck? And he's like, so don't move. You know, there's an aqualoa on your neck. I was almost in tears at this point, because I do not like bugs, especially centipedes crawling on me. And, you know, to have one of these ones, a poisonous centipede on my neck, probably not the best place to have a centipede. But I remember my companion went and got the father of the family that we were living with. And, you know, the father of the family comes over, and I'm expecting him to, like, you know, be serious and, you know, take certain steps in which to get me to safety. But I remember he would call his whole family over, and they were all laughing, and, you know, that I'm almost to the point of crying, and I have tears in my eyes, and they're all just laughing at me. And because they're used to these creatures, and I'm, you know, at the point where I'm about to freak out. And, you know, finally the father just went and, you know, grabbed it, or just hit it off of my neck, you know, real quickly. And it was crazy to see how fearless they are when it comes to these things that they're used to, accustomed to me coming from the States, having no idea what these things are. Because those things, I've seen them bite other missionaries as well, and I've seen, like, the bumps or bruises that they have from them. And, you know, that's what got me terrified of these things. I mean, there's other points. I remember we were going through the jungle through a path to get to an investigator's home, and there are wild pigs out there. And I remember, we were walking through and we saw, maybe 5 or 6 little baby ones running around, and we're like, oh, this is weird, because usually families would own those ones and raise them for food. And then I remember my companion was just frozen with fear because he saw the mom or the dad, whoever it was, and they had these tusks coming out, and I was like, oh, this is not good. And I remember just running down the trail as fast as I could, and you could hear it squealing and running after us because it thought we were going to hurt, its babies. And so it was different running from a pig rather than I thought it would be a monkey or tiger. But they do have wildlife out there, such as, those scary places. There are some, there are a lot of people that do drink out there. Drinking, a lot of people do like to drink. The main beer they use out there is called Vailima, and you always see bottles everywhere. A lot of people collect the bottles. They'll use bottles for different purposes, to hold, mosquito coils to keep mosquitoes away, or they'll use it for water storage, or for cleaning supplies and things like that. And you will see that most of the people that do drink will stay. They have stores along the road every couple miles, just little stores. They're almost like a snack shack sort of thing. And most of the people that do their drinking will stay at these stores and just keep drinking them by the bottles. And I remember one time we were walking, me and my companion, and it was time to get home. It was nighttime, and I remember, there was, most of them weren't members, and they would scream out to us. They'd be like, Palangi, which is like the white term, or like an American term. And so they'd yell out Palangi or Faifeao, which means missionaries. And they try to get your attention, and sometimes they would try to mess with you when they would get a little intoxicated. And, the best thing that I learned was that, try to not make eye contact with those sort of drunk, because they may take it in offense that you're better than them, or that you're looking down on them. And so as long as you're, just staying focused and kind of just avoiding eye contact with those certain groups or certain people, they won't think anything of it. They'll think, oh, they're busy, they're on their way, they have other things on their mind. So I think I think they want something to start, but they'll only start something if you make that first move and make eye contact, sort of. So, but other than that, I mean, there's not really any scary stories or any crime things that went on over there. A lot of people always ask me, how was the food when I come home from my mission? Just because they gain a knowledge that Polynesian food is super good. And it really is. Most of the time on my mission, it consisted of meat, and they always eat chicken or pork are out there. And my first couple areas, I was actually close to the ocean in Samacau, and that was on the kind of by the wharf area where we would take the ferry from one island to another. And in that area, we would mostly get fish and crab and lobster, and that was really good because I really love seafood. And there was a couple other things that you'd see on the plate and realize I have no idea what that is, and this is new to me. A huge thing I didn't eat before my mission when I got out there was octopus, and I've always heard that it's super chewy, and a lot of people don't like it, or they do like it. There's no in between. And so I was definitely going to try it. I wasn't going to not miss that opportunity. But the way they do is they cook it in coconut milk, which is kind of interesting because they use coconut milk a lot out there. And when I first tried it, it was super chewy, but that coconut milk actually made it taste really good. And I remember I ate my the first bowl of or octopus, and my companion looked over like he was impressed that I would eat that because he wouldn't touch it, and he was from Samoa, so it was pretty funny to see that happen. There's actually a lot of people grow their own food. They all have their plantations out there, and that's because the Samoan saying is that you can live off the land, and technically they do. They have their own plantations out there where they grow different sorts of vegetables, and then they raise different animals such as chicken and pigs, and it's crazy to think that they do all this, and they don't care about money. They don't need money. They can just live off that land. And the main plant that they use is taro. And taro's sort of like a potato, but a little bit thicker when you eat that. So, and I love taro. And what they do is they use, so they'll dry out the coconut once they crack it open and drain all the liquid out, and they'll let it dry up. And then they'll use the skin, the white skin on the inside, and they'll scrape it off. And then they use sort of like a strain or a straw sort of fixture to squeeze all the juice out of the skin that they scraped out from the coconut. And so they'll use that as a juice, and they'll mix it with a little bit of salt, and they usually use that as a dressing for the taro, and they use it for the octopus as well. So they usually, I would say that's sort of the main dish that they use. They call it pe'epe'e. So, and it's really good with everything. It may not sound good, coconut milk and then salt, but it makes everything taste delicious out there. When I was serving in Sava'i back in Neafu, in that back part of the island, I remember, because in Samoa, for the mission, they would feed the missionaries twice a day. They would feed them for breakfast in the morning and dinner at night. And I remember the meals were always heavy in the morning and at night. So you'd pretty much be having 2 dinners instead of breakfast and dinner. And I remember that area that we were serving in, we would always have fried chicken, pork, chicken soup, hot dogs, just all this heavy food in the morning, and then at night you would get pork, this huge pig that they would cook for you, place it in front of you, fish, and they also cook bananas out there. They boil the bananas, which is really nice, and they drizzle that pe'epe'e on there, that coconut sauce. And I remember me and my companion, because the bishop assigns the families the meals for that week, and I think for a month straight we would just get fried chicken every time, because that's what people thought missionaries love, was fried chicken. And it got to the point where I probably couldn't eat much more fried chicken. And I remember my companion, because I was still fresh, went up and told the bishop, if there's any way, if we could get anything else other than fried chicken, that would be awesome. And then it was kind of embarrassing, because the bishop, and with Samoa, the people of Samoa, they're not afraid to speak their mind, and they have a sense of humor that's undescribable about them, because they're all about joking and having a great time. And I remember the bishop got up in sacrament meeting and said, the missionaries are sick of fried chicken, let's get them something else. And we're like, well, I guess that's going to work now. And then I think for the next month or 2 that I was there, we just got straight pork, which wasn't that much healthier, but it was a good change. Water was kind of scarce, and it's super expensive out there in the stores they have. So I know that, I think in other missions that I've heard from other friends, that the 3 main sodas they had was Coke, Fanta, and Sprite that you could choose from. And it's crazy to think that the soda was less expensive than the water. I think the water bottles out there went from $6 to $8 compared to a soda that went for $1 to $2. And I remember this one time where me and my companion, we didn't want any soda. We just needed water, and it rains a ton over there. That's why it's so green. And the people of Samoa, they have these huge tanks on the side of their house that when the sheet metal collects all that rain, it'll drag into the pipes and it'll go into this huge tank that they have. And so we would use that tank to shower as well. and then we would also use it to drink water, and which was crazy because I've never drinking rainwater or any sort of water other than, from the faucet or anything like that. And so, it was a blessing from the Lord, because we were praying for a way to, find some water for us. That way we could collect and take water bottles with us while proselyting, because sometimes a lot of missionaries do get dehydrated. And that's the thing they emphasize in our mission, was staying hydrated, because it does get hot out there. And, as long as you're preparing yourself, like the Lord says, He'll give you that strength to do all things. And so, just praying and fasting and then finding this way that we could get water helped us to, go about our day proselyting and keeping our energy up to help do the Lord's work. I remember when I first got there, because I still had American money, and we'd go to the banks over there to exchange the money for the Samoan currency they have. And I remember at the time when we were exchanging money, I think the ratio for the US dollar was $1 for 3 Samoan dollars. And I remember that I was like, wow, that's a lot. That's a good exchange rate here, especially for us missionaries coming from the States to serve in Samoa. And, as a missionary, you'll get we get the monthly allowance that we use for food or laundry supplies or transportation to get us there. And I remember that the mission fund, or the monthly allowance that we would get, I think it was maybe $30 Samoa money, and which would be $10 American. And I was like, how are we going to survive off that much money? And, to come to think about it, there's different things that you can do. The people have their plantation, and there's acres of plantation that they have, where they have their taro, and they have there's pineapples, mangoes, and things like that. And there's places in the market where they sell them for super cheap. And they're just trying to help themselves out to maybe get money for a bus fare, or to go see maybe family members on another island. And the cost of living there is so low. There's some families that don't even, they don't have jobs to earn money, or they don't earn money at all. I remember serving in the backside of Savai'i, because you grow up in a village where your family name is there, and in order to own a piece of land, you have to be at least half Samoan. And so it's interesting to see that different families, that you can tell where their last name comes from, what village that comes from. And I remember when in Savai'i, because my grandpa's took over the last name Aloy, and Aloy is a chief name out there in the village of Saumata. And so when I had a chance to serve in Saumata, and people would always give me these weird looks, because they'd look at my name tag and realize, that's a chief last name in our village. What are you doing here? And I had no idea what I was doing there. And I remember I met with a stake president who gave me a background about that knowledge of my last name and where it came from. And I remember at the time I was only maybe 3 or 4 months out, still learning the language, trying to grasp a basic knowledge of it. And, I remember sitting there talking to the stake president, just praying that I would understand what he was trying to tell me. And, as clear as day, I could understand just the basic of that family work that was related to my last name. And going back to my patriarchal blessing, I knew that, I was meant to be in this area at this time to learn that. And I actually got to meet a couple of my relatives, one of my dad's uncles who wasn't a member of the church, and I was able to help teach him a little bit about the church. He was mostly shocked that I was here in Samoa, and it's crazy to see how God puts you in these positions to fulfill His work. You may question it at some times. I know I did, especially being in that area when everybody was looking at me kind of weird. It's crazy to see how things happen in the Lord's work. And, the the people out there, they're really independent. They really like to work on their own, and they definitely have teamwork skills where they'll work together on their plantation and things like that. But yeah, the cost of living out there, they just go by that saying, we can live off the land. We don't need money to bring us happiness. They're more family-based, work hard to keep that culture going. When I was in the back island from Neafu to the market, which was in town by the wharf, I remember the bus fare cost about, I think it was $3 to $5 depending on which village you were in, and Samoan money, so about $1 something for U.S. currency. I remember about 2 pounds of rice out there was about $3.50. Because they do love rice, but it's sort of a expensive import that they have. They don't have a lot of rice out there. I do remember every time for P-Day, a lot of missionaries would like to go to McDonald's, and seeing the McDonald's menu out there compared to what it is here was insane. I remember for like a Big Mac meal, the total price was $20, and I couldn't believe that. And that's $20 American, so I was astounded on how much people would go to buy fast food, especially McDonald's. But it is definitely cheaper to buy in the markets. Bananas you could buy them for the bunch for a couple dollars here and there, and mangoes and pineapples for cents or dollars at a time. So the people, they could charge more definitely for those things, but they don't like to overcharge. I know there's in certain markets they'll sell different materials to make clothing out of, and you think they'd be expensive because it's a long piece of cloth, but they would sell them for cents or maybe $1 per couple hundred feet for things they were willing to give up. So they're more just willing to help out. But yeah, definitely in the market, I would say, I never saw anything drastically over than $20, unless it was sort of like a souvenir or a type of gift. Well, most of the time I lived in missionary homes. It's kind of different because there's certain areas where there's missionary homes, just a little, 2-bedroom or 2-room building that they built on the church chapel properties. So it was kind of different living on the church grounds, because they have it's almost like a shed that you'd see in your backyard here, that you'd see a random shed just in the back of the chapels, and that's where the missionaries would live. And I was grateful for that because the mission paid for that. We didn't have to pay rent. But families that we did stay with, their electricity is run on cash power, where they would buy cash power points or card or time limits and put a code in on their little box that they would have, their electricity box, and that electricity would last for however many hours that they bought. And so there was no monthly payments or things like that for rent or utilities or electricity, because it's different. It's like they have an expiration date on when the power is going to run out, and then they just have to renew it every so often or how long. And they really do save their money by not wasting electricity all the time. A lot of them will use fires as light at night, and some of them have flashlights as well. So they always want to try and conserve that energy or that cash power that they use out there. And it was interesting to see that. I remember a family that we were staying with, they wanted us they would use the term, buy us electricity. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And my companion had to explain to me that we would go buy these cards, cash power cards that they could put in to their system, their little box that would, make that electricity last for days or months at a time. So it was interesting there, but we would usually pay families around 100 tala, or I guess that would be around $30-$40 American a month for families that we stayed with. There's so many things I love about the Samoan people, but I think the main thing that I love is just that the love they have for everyone. They're they're really humble, and they're really selfless. They're willing to give of themselves. And learning from my dad, I would always see my dad, not hesitant on whether to help out with different service projects or things like that. And I never understood that. I just thought he was just a good guy, always willing to do the extra mile, or go the extra mile and do the extra steps that it took. But being submerged in the Samoan culture, I could see, everybody wanting to do that. Everybody takes the initiative. Everybody, loves helping out one another. And that's something that I miss and love about Samoa, is just seeing that no matter what the circumstance is, you're rich, poor, in between, they're always willing to help out one another. Just their selflessness in general is just amazing to me, and the love that they have, especially the members, the love that they have for missionaries, because they want to do everything that they can in order to, prolong the Lord's work. They're willing to sacrifice all that they have. I mean, give their meals, any money that they have if the missionaries need to go to town. They're just willing to give, and just the selflessness they have is amazing. The language was definitely my top priority, because I wanted to learn the language so bad, just because my dad he knows it. That's his first language, it's his primary language. And, always growing up and hearing him speak it with his brothers and sisters that are here, I was like, man, that is so cool. Such a cool language, because it sounds nothing like, it doesn't even sound like a language. And so I remember in the MTC, I knew basic words here and there, different phrases as well. And so that definitely did help me in learning the language. And, the thing about the Samoan language is it's almost, your tongue is getting twisted all the time, because it's mostly consisted of vowels. There's never two consonants together. And so you're always, trying to pronounce the vowels. And the vowels, they pronounce it as A as in A, E as in or I as in E, O as in O, and U as in U. So it's a little different on how they pronounce their vowels than they do here in the States. For example, and almost everything is twice as long in Samoan as it is in English. So, but it does give a better description in Samoan than you could in English. When you say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to an investigator or someone as well, it takes a while, because, for example, it's Olea Kalasia Yesu Kariso Leapa Iawasa Ngatai. And so I remember it took me so long to learn that phrase alone, and I was like, I have to say this every day. How am I gonna, remember this? And as time goes on, you can't. I guess a huge thing in learning the language is you can't compare yourself to other missionaries who are doing the same thing, learning the language as well. So I think that's where a lot of people get frustrated, is comparing themselves, because everybody learns at a different pace, and I realized that as well. I was picking it up faster than others, just because I heard the words, heard the pronunciation, knew how to pronounce words before, or accustomed to somebody who's never even heard of Samoa before. And the language, it was tough for me, because being half Samoan, people out there expected me to already know the language. And so the older ladies out there would always give me the hardest time, telling me that I'm Samoan and I don't know the Samoan language. And sometimes I get really frustrated, like, I'm trying my hardest to learn this language, and all you guys are doing is putting me down. And it got to the point where, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to take any criticism, so I'm just not going to speak. And, my companion, thank goodness for my companion, he's like, I went through the same thing, because he was half Samoan and he didn't know the language as well. He's like, you just got to, pursue through that. There's going to come obstacles, even if it's from the members or anybody else. It's just that culture that they have, where I feel like sometimes they try to get you irritated so that you'll try harder. And I remember in Neafu, the bishop's wife. I remember I didn't like to see her at church because she was always giving me a hard time, and she would always tell everybody to give me a hard time. And I was like, please, come on, you're the bishop's wife. You're supposed to be helping me. But in the end, like, short or long story short, taking that as motivation, she helped me step outside my comfort zone. And because the best way to learn the language is by speaking the language. And, she really forced me to speak it. And, by forcing me to speak it, helped me, not be scared to speak in front of these people who know what I'm trying to say. And, I'm grateful for her, even though at the time I wasn't, that, in the long run, I was able to step out of my comfort zone and not be scared to speak in that language. So I guess just, speaking it all the time, because, it's not your first language, and, people out there know it's not your first language as well. So they know you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to make mistakes, but the only way to correct those mistakes is to, what better person to help you fix those mistakes than somebody who knows it, and that primary language is theirs. So yeah, it was a fun time. The first basic phrase that we learned in the MTC was the Book of Mormon, and I remember it was difficult for me sometimes because the way they pronounced their vowels, and I thought I was doing good, but my teacher told me I wasn't, because with the way we're used to speaking English, we pronounce vowels differently. And so, like, the Book of Mormon in sort of like a English accent, they would say like Ole Tusia Mamona. So, and the teacher was like, no, that's awful, that's wrong. We're like, okay, we'll step it up. And so, we'd try saying not Ole Tusia Mamona. And then, hearing how we would listen to videos, and we'd actually hear testimonies from, people that have served there or natives from there. And then, the way they say it is they have like a deeper voice. They would be, the correct way they say is like, Ole Tusia Mamona. And so they it's almost like they open their mouths a little bit wider when they're pronouncing the A's and O's. Instead of Mamona, it's Mamona. Sort of like, because I remember when before I got my mission call, I would always Samoa was Samoa. And I remember giving my homecoming, or my farewell talk, and would say, I'm grateful to go to Samoa, can't wait to serve in Samoa. And my uncles and dads are like, it's not Samoa, it's Samoa. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll work on that pronunciation. So, it's you can definitely tell when someone doesn't know the language, and that's probably where, that bishop's wife knew I was pronouncing things wrong. Going back to the Church of Jesus Christ, they would say, like, in an English accent, you'd kind of be like, Ole Ekalesia Yesu Keriso, where in Samoan you would be more pronouncive on those vowels, Ole Ekalesia Yesu Keriso. So it's really cool to hear the differences. And in the Samoan language, something that I wasn't used to is that T's and K's are interchangeable. So you speak in T's when it's more of a respectful setting, as if you're giving a thank you speech, or if you're bearing testimony or speaking in church, they would use T's, such as like tato would be, which means we. They could interchange it with K's and say kako, which would mean we. And so I remember learning just T's in the MTC, and then going out in Samoa where they would change it to K's. I had no idea what was going on. I was like, okay, they're speaking a whole different language that I did not learn anything in the MTC. And then, realizing that you just gotta, it's more of an ear. And then that's where the gift of tongues comes in there, is just understanding that the T's and K's are interchangeable. And it was really interesting to see that the T's are for respectful terms. I remember because every house that you go to in Samoa, when you leave the house, you give a thank you speech, blessing the family. It's called a whawhatai, which means thanks, and you say whawhatai because the T is being respectful. And, if you're using it like in slang terms, just thanking somebody, like, you would use whawhakai. So it's interesting to see how the T's and K's The K's definitely sound cooler than the T's, but the T's definitely make it sound more respectful when you're speaking that language. I think eating fish eyes was the craziest that I had. Yeah, definitely by far. Is that our van, one of the vans got trapped in a canal, and because the rain was so heavy, and then another van was trapped in between two canals, and so we couldn't cross either canal for the road, so we had to stay the night in our van, calling our mission president. So that was the craziest experience I had. Going to the temple and seeing my grandma for the first time in many years. So that was amazing. When you give a thank you speech at the end of a meeting with a family or a dinner meal, I remember that you thank them for their food and then for the eating time. And I remember, I guess I actually said a bad word so I thanked them not for the food but something else. And I remember the family was looking at me like, what did he just do? And then my companion had to explain I was new, so that was embarrassing. The biggest life lesson I learned was never take anything for granted. I think is a huge one I learned out there. I mean, the people of Samoa love music, and our mission president would push music, try to learn musical talents. And I remember the musical talent that I love and learned today was playing the ukulele. So I love playing that now. It's a blast. I remember when I first got there, we had the aftershocks of the tsunami that had just happened out there. So we would get aftershocks and different typhoons where you could see the eye of the storm, and the thunderstorms over there are insane. It's almost like someone's just constantly dumping a bucket of water on you. So definitely a severe weather change out there. So the big tsunami hit just, I want to say 2 or 3 months before I got there. So most of the missionary work was service work and service projects and cleaning up materials and providing service to other people who had lost everything from that tsunami. Going back to learning the language was definitely a hard experience for me, just being Samoan and not knowing the Samoan language. But I think just trying to get my point across was frustrating for me and more difficult, knowing that the people kind of looked down on me for not knowing the language. Be open to everything they say, and don't take everything they say seriously, because the Samoan people, they love to joke around. They love to make fun. They love to, that's part of them, part of their culture, part of them, gaining a family member or a great friend is just being able to joke and communicate with them on any level. So I think just keeping an open mind is probably the biggest one that I have. Is definitely to stay busy. I know there's times where you're constantly busy on the mission doing things one after another, and I know that things can get lackadaisical when you come home from the mission. So I think just staying busy is a huge thing in returning from a mission. I'm truly grateful for my mission. I know every missionary has a different purpose, I mean, we all have the same purpose to help others come unto Christ, but there's different reasons for certain missionaries there's different people waiting for you. And I never realized that until I was out there submerged in the mission field, that I found the people that were ready to hear the gospel from not only me but my companion as well, and they were only able to hear that message by following the Spirit. The main thing I want to emphasize to those that are preparing to serve and those who have already served is continuing to keep the Spirit with you. There's many instances on the mission where you'll feel the Spirit's prompting heavily, and then there's other times where you'll feel it as a whisper, as it describes it is, and you always have to keep yourself worthy and ready to hear those promptings. And I'm so grateful for my mission that it taught me that to always keep my mind focused on the Spirit, because there's so many things that I could have missed out on without listening to the promptings of the Spirit. I know the church is true without a doubt, and I'm so grateful for the Spirit and for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and His sacrifice, in which we can return to live with our Father in heaven again. I know He loves us very much, and he's always he's eternally grateful for those that are willing to push forward the work here. I know it's a huge sacrifice, but sacrifices do pay off, and as members of the church, we're all examples. We just choose what that example will be. And as missionaries, we have to be held to a pretty high standard because we're representing the Lord Jesus Christ. I know the gospel is true. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I had to proclaim that message to the people in Samoa for 2 years. It's the best experience I've had throughout my life thus far, and I'm eternally grateful for the lessons that I've learned and the life lessons that I will continue to apply forward in my life. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.